Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into the evolution of a true engineering artifact. In this explainer, we're going to trace the life cycle, the mechanics, and the massive global footprint of a tool that's left a permanent mark on industrial history. We're looking at the anatomy of an absolute icon, the Remington 870. I'm super excited to guide you through this material because we get to see exactly how a single mechanical concept scales up to impact the entire world. Okay, let's dive right into this. Over 10 million. Just think about the sheer scale of manufacturing needed to hit a number like that. In industrial production, right, hitting 1 million is a huge milestone, but surpassing 10 million? That means its design has totally transcended its original purpose to become a ubiquitous piece of global hardware. It immediately makes you wonder, what single mechanical design could possibly warrant that level of relentless, nonstop production? Well, that staggering statistic belongs to the Remington Model 870 pump-action shotgun. The very first model rolled off the line back in 1951, and incredibly, they are still being produced today. Now, what's especially interesting here is the specific variant we're analyzing. You're looking at the distinct silhouette of the 870P. The P stands for police, and our sources highlight that this model is set apart by a receiver made entirely of steel, which gives it unbelievable durability. Plus, this specific setup is designed to carry 4 extra rounds of ammunition. It's actively in service with military and police forces all over the world right now. But to really grasp how it got absolutely everywhere, we need to look back at where it all started. Section 1. The Remington Legacy, 1816 to today. So this is the founder, Eliphalet Remington. Back in 1816, Eliphalet was a young guy with this quiet, unshakable confidence. He genuinely believed he could handcraft a flintlock barrel that was as good, or honestly even better, than anything he could just go out and buy. And you know what? His confidence was completely justified. That single barrel he hammered out set a brand new benchmark for firearm accuracy. It's actually kind of mind-boggling to contrast his solitary workbench in 1816 with the massive modern manufacturing scale that churns out millions of units today. That one single flintlock sparked generations of products and essentially kick-started a 190-year tradition of accuracy and responsibility. Which brings us to this idea: safety is critical to performance. Now, this isn't just some modern, catchy corporate slogan. It's the absolute foundational ethos written right into the company's manual. Remington recognized from day one that these handcrafted tools were potentially lethal. Their literature treats this reality with the utmost seriousness, stating point-blank that shooting accidents are usually caused by careless oversights, things like failing to control the muzzle direction or accidentally leaving ammo in the chamber. Because at the end of the day, there is absolutely no calling back a bullet once it's fired. This deep-seated respect for the lethal nature of the machine is what has driven their manufacturing and handling ethos for nearly 2 centuries. Section 2. Inside the machine. Let's look at the mechanics of the 870. To really get a feel for this tool, we've got to demystify its intimate mechanical nature. Our source material includes this super fascinating gunsmithing transcript that walks us step by step right through the disassembly. So let's trace the kinetic action together. First up, you ensure the bolt sits flush on top of the bolt carrier, and you set that carrier aside. Next, you grab a remarkably tiny tool, like a mini screwdriver or, incredibly, even a dental pick, to pull the extractor plunger back into the bolt and release the tension. It's pretty wild to think you might actually use a dentist tool to maintain a rugged combat shotgun, right? Finally, to put it back together and slide the bolt assembly in, you have to physically reach up inside the receiver, depress the right shell latch, shift the bolt exactly a 1/4 inch, and then push the left shell latch out of the way. It's this highly precise, almost choreographed dance of springs, pins, plungers, and machined grooves all interacting under tension. Now, zooming out just a bit from those individual springs and plungers, we can take a look at the broader technical specs for the 870P. According to the Small Arms and Light Weapons Guide, or SALWA for short, it falls squarely under the rifles and carbines category. Its operating system is a manual slide-action mechanism, which, let's be real, most of us just call pump action. The standard length of the weapon comes in at 971 millimeters, and it feeds its ammunition through an underbarrel tubular magazine, which sits neatly right beneath the main barrel. And this brilliantly illustrates its specific classification. Over on the left, we see it formally categorized as a rifle and carbine class weapon. And on the right, we've got its cartridge, the legendary 12 gauge. For those of you who really love the exacting technical details, our data points out that the bullet diameter for a standard 12 gauge is exactly 18.53 millimeters. These specifications aren't just trivia. This is the standard language used by global researchers to accurately identify and categorize this exact piece of engineering when it turns up out in the field. Section 3, Global Distribution, a worldwide footprint. These shaded regions right here illustrate the staggering geographical spread of this specific weapon design. I mean, what started on a single wooden workbench in 1816 has literally cascaded across oceans and borders. The Interactive Guide on Small Arms and Light Weapons compiles this data to give us a clear visual picture of how different types, makes, and models of weapons spread globally. The 870 is truly a global artifact, firmly planted across multiple continents and hemispheres. In fact, according to the tracking data, the Remington 870p is currently found in 31 different countries. We're talking about nations as geographically and politically diverse as Argentina, Germany, the Philippines, and the United States. It's also tracked in Australia, Belgium, Singapore, South Korea, and Sweden, just to name a handful more from the dataset. The presence of this single model spans across vast geographical divides. But that really begs the question, how exactly do we know all of this? How do organizations effectively track the global spread of small arms and light weapons to actually help us comprehend global security? It's a massive undertaking, and the methodology behind it is super fascinating. Section 4, Tracking the Numbers, Making Sense of the Data. So the Bonn International Center for Conversion, or BICC, developed this tracking database in close cooperation with the Bundeswehr Verification Center. To ensure complete accuracy and transparency without endangering any confidential sources, they strictly separate their data into primary and secondary sources. Primary sources are rock-solid proof of an event created at the exact time it happened. We're talking official transfer authorizations, end-user certificates, or rigorous academic journal surveys. Secondary sources, on the other hand, are interpretations of facts. This includes things like Wikipedia, news media commentary, or training manuals. By clearly classifying the data this way, they maintain a highly reliable, totally objective database.
Furthermore, researchers apply specific data tracking tags to every single country where the weapon is found. G stands for government, meaning the sources indicate the weapon is held by state agencies. N is for non-government, indicating it's held by non-governmental armed groups. And U is unspecified, meaning researchers know for a fact the weapon is in the country, but they just don't have verified data on exactly who is holding it. For example, in our source data, the 870p in the United States and Germany gets tagged with a G, while over in Syria it's tagged with a U. This objective tagging system is what allows analysts to precisely trace the incredibly complex life cycle of these tools. Which brings us to our final overarching thought for this explainer. How does a single mechanical design ethos from 1816 manage to ripple through the hands of millions globally today? From Eliphalet Remington's solitary workbench to the intimate dance of the extractor plunger inside a steel receiver, all the way to 31 countries being meticulously tracked by international researchers. It's just a profound testament to the lasting impact of industrial design. It really forces us to realize that when we manufacture a highly effective tool, its life cycle totally outgrows its creator, spreading across the globe in ways we meticulously have to track just to understand. I hope this deep dive gave you a fresh, structured perspective on the massive footprint of the things we build. Thanks so much for learning with me, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.